be talking about God's prophetic time tables and prophetic time cycles. Prophecy chronology, 70 weeks of scriptures. So I want to read the one over in Daniel chapter 9 to show you what one prophetic cycle looks like. So we'll look at verse 24. 70 weeks are determined for your people in your holy city. 70 weeks. Normally you would think weeks of days, but this turned out to be weeks of years. Weeks of years are called heptads. To the Jews, it's heptads. So 70 weeks of years, which is 490 years. As you'll see here in your chart here, God deals with man in 490-year cycles. There are many different cycles that God uses. There is the 2,520-year cycle, the 490-year cycle, the 40-year cycle. These time periods are for a specific time that God is dealing with mankind on the earth. So back to the scripture here, it says 70 weeks are determined. Now look here, for your people and your holy city. So that is, number one, the Jews and Jerusalem. It's not for the church, even though the church may be involved collaterally. These cycles are determined for the Jewish people. 70 weeks of years. And then he goes down and says several things. To finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness, seal up the vision of prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Well, these prophecies would later be fulfilled in the time of Christ, and to anoint the most holy. Well, that was when Jesus came. Know therefore and understand that the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now the prophecy here, now this is really interesting. God gives Daniel this prophecy that wouldn't even begin to happen until a couple of hundred years later. And this happened under Xerxes of the Medo-Persian Empire in Nehemiah chapter 2. When he allowed Nehemiah and the Jews to start returning home to rebuild the walls and the gates of the city. Ezra the priest took a group back also with him. And they would start restoration eventually of the temple. And it says here, to restore and build Jerusalem. One of the things they were restoring, and when you go to the book of Nehemiah and the book of Ezra, I love the book of Nehemiah because it talks about how Nehemiah had to get the people following this captivity of 70 years back into Jerusalem to clean up the mess that had been there for 70 years. Jerusalem at one time, at the time of Solomon's temple, Solomon's temple, I believe, was completed in 910 BC. So it stood there as this beautiful edifice from about 910 BC down to 606 BC. And the final destruction of it came in 586 or 87 BC under King Nebuchadnezzar. But they didn't totally destroy it all. They tore down the gates. They tore down some of the walls. They sacked the temple, took the utensils out of the temple that were valuable of gold and silver. And the temple was still standing, but it was kind of in shambles. And so Jeremiah was left behind. And the reason he was left behind was because he had told the king, through the prophecies of God, to surrender to Nebuchadnezzar when they came down to surround the city. And it would be easier on them if they surrendered. Well, these arrogant military people said, you know, we can take on we're going to have the Egyptians come up and help us, and we can take on these Babylonians, and we can beat them. But see, it had already been prophesied that Babylon was going to crush them. And Jeremiah was just giving them the prophecies and told them that because of their sin and because of their idolatry, they were at that time, they had the god of Baal in the temple, and they were worshiping God of Baal, worshiping God of Jehovah, other gods, Ashtaroth, and all of them were in the temple. Statues of them were in there. And Jeremiah told him, he says, you got to get all these false gods out of the temple. God's going to destroy you. He's going to take you off into captivity for 70 years. And he's going to bring the bird of prey out of the east. And that was Nebuchadnezzar. He raised Nebuchadnezzar up for this specific purpose. To come in and sack the temple and take the people out for 70 years. Nebuchadnezzar didn't know it, but he was God's instrument of wrath. In 722 BC, about 115 years before, God had raised up the Assyrians as his instrument of wrath to go into the northern 10 tribes of Assyria and yank them up out of the land and take them into captivity. Now, the Assyrian captivity was different than the Babylonian captivity. When the Assyrians came in, they were ruthless. I mean, ruthless people. And they would take a family, say of 4, and split all 4 of them up and take them to different parts of the world of the Syrian Empire so they'd never see each other again. And that's the ones that survived. A lot of them were killed. Why? Because under Ahab and Jezebel, under the Omari dynasty, they were so evil. And God warned them through the prophets, Isaiah and the other prophets in the northern kingdom, to repent and quit worshiping these false gods, or God was going to bring destruction on them. And he did. That's what Jonathan Cahn's books are about, a lot of them. Is about, he went back and looked at these prophecies of Isaiah and everything. He began to write the Harbinger books. If you remember, have you ever read them? The Harbingers under Jonathan Cahn. And what the Harbinger was, it was the warning. It was the warning to Israel and the northern tribes that God was going to bring judgment on them if they didn't repent. Repentance meant get rid of the false gods and come back to God and start worshiping God and not other gods. When you worship 2 gods in the same temple, it's called syncretism. It's like synergy. It comes from the word synergy. Things working together. Syncretism. And I got exposed to that just this last year out at the military base. They worship Mormons, I think Islam, Christianity, Judaism, all in the same chapel out there at Goodfellow. Of course, you can pick the service you want to go to, but they use the same chapel to do all 4 of these 2 false religions. Judaism and Christianity are okay, but Mormonism and Islam, and they even have Mormon priests out there, and they have, Mormons do probably more damage to people in the world and lead more to hell than even maybe Islam. It's just a false doctrine, and so when Israel was doing that, they got judgment brought on them. Now back to Daniel 9. Know and understand the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem. I've got to make a side note of that. Just so happened that the way when the king made an edict, a law, they had these clay tablets or ceramic material. They wrote all the edict in it, and they took it to an oven and fired it and glazed it. So it was permanent. And then they stored these in these like big oven type things that they had stored. So happened, I think in 1882 or 3, a British archaeologist was over there in Babylon. And he was, or actually it wasn't Babylon, it was in Persia. Susa, I believe Susa, around where present day, let's see, Susa is south of Tehran. Tehran's, I believe, the capital of Persia now, or it's Iran's what they call it, but it used to be Persia. And they found this tablet and took it back to the British Royal Museum. That proves the Bible. Now, when did this happen? It happened on your chart here. He's got it on March the 14th, 445 BC. Now, that is a very important day. Nisan 1. Some say Nisan 1 was the first day of March. Others say around the 15th. But the key is the day, is the year, 445 BC. And on this 70 years that the countdown began, it says here, know and therefore and understand that the going forth of the command to restore and build, until Messiah the Prince, until he rides into the city, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 69 weeks of years. What turned that was 483 years. Exactly to the day. That's why Jesus, when he came on the scene, sharply came after the leaders of Israel and the learned, that they didn't know when he was supposed to arrive because they should have known when he was coming. Well, who knew when he was coming? The kings over in Babylon, which were probably Jewish astronomers who had read these prophecies of Daniel, because Daniel was in Babylon when he wrote these. So when Daniel died later, all of his scrolls and stuff were left there for these Jews that were, or they probably weren't all left, but his writings were widely known among the Jewish people there. I believe they were brought back to Jerusalem when they were allowed to return. Now remember this, Daniel was so favored of God that he became the prime minister of the Babylonian Empire. And then when, under Darius the Great, the Medo-Persians came in and took over the Babylonians, that they found such favor with Daniel, they made him the prime minister of the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, is that favor or not?
Yeah.
You might remember Darius is the one that ordered him to go to the lion's den. Because Darius was kind of tricked by his magistrates. But he had to obey the law himself. So Daniel had to go. But you know, it was Darius, who was really a pagan king, or emperor, whatever they called him, that was actually praying to the God of Daniel that Daniel would be okay, because he loved Daniel. And when you'll read the story, when the sun broke, he was one of the first ones that ran down to check, to look in to see if Daniel was okay, and he saw all the lions asleep. and Daniel came up to the door, and they let him out. And he said, "Oh, the God of Daniel. The God of Daniel." And you know, another thing that's really interesting in this story is Nebuchadnezzar was raised up. Nebuchadnezzar was the greatest man on earth at that time. Because in the vision that he had and Daniel interpreted, the head of gold represented the Babylonian Empire and Nebuchadnezzar. But he was so prideful and so arrogant, God brought him down and turned him into a person that was like a wild animal. And I think it was a 7-year period he was out roaming the country like he was a wild animal. And one day he was like the prodigal son. He looked up at the God of Daniel and repented and came back. And then you read, I think it's in Daniel chapter 3, and maybe even 4, where Nebuchadnezzar became a believer in the God of Daniel and worshiped him. So God can take big rulers and bring them down anytime he wants to. They serve at his pleasure. So no ruler should ever get to thinking they're too big for their britches. Look how big Hitler thought he was. And where's Hitler at? He's in the lake of fire. Well, he's in hell. He'll be in the lake of fire. What about Stalin? Murdered, each one of those murdered 6 million Jews plus. Not counting countless thousands and hundreds of thousands of lives brought on by Hitler during the World War II, and then the Russians. Some believe that Stalin might have killed as many as 20 million Jews and gypsies and all those people he just wanted to exterminate. Stalin was evil too, but God brought them all down. They're all gone now. Look at Germany now. If it hadn't been for America to rebuild it, they would still be in shambles. Germany is a going nation now because we poured all of our taxpayer dollars into rebuilding that. If you want to see how bad it looked, go look at some old film of World War II and see what our daylight bombing did to Germany. There wasn't hardly one thing standing except some of the churches and some of the sites, historical sites and churches were off limits to bombing. Dresden, which was a beautiful big German city, was firebombed by the British in one night and incinerated that entire city nearly. The people didn't die from the bombs, they died from the suffocation. Because the fire sucked all the oxygen out and they couldn't breathe. And Winston Churchill did that because Hitler started night bombings on London. So what I'm saying is, leaders, I don't care who you are, you can be brought down. Yeah. God can bring you down. Yes. And we see this in the stories of the Old Testament of what happened here. And then look at the emperors of Rome in the time of Paul. All these emperors are gone. Look at Italy now. It's like a lower level nation. Out of Rome, they used to rule the empire, the whole world. Now Italy is What is it known for? Monuments and clothing. They make a lot of clothes over there. Except the Chinese have bought all the nice companies out and put all Chinese workers in there and brought the prices down. And that happened during COVID. China came into Italy and those places and stole all their big, beautiful perfume companies and their elegant dress companies and all that. Because Italy was in debt to China. So they came in and just took it all over. Today, we see leaders have come and gone. In fact, when you look at the vision of Nebuchadnezzar, these world empires, the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Grecian Empire, and the Roman Empire, they have all come and gone, except the 10 toes of iron mixed with clay. That is not really an empire. It is a congregation of nations that have come together to form what we call the beast system that's going on in Europe. And I just saw yesterday where Klaus Schwab of the WEF, World Economic Forum, is stepping down. And that man was evil because he was behind all of the World Economic Forum is the group out of Europe that wants to rule the world and wants to rule all of us financially. They want to tell us what we can eat, what we can drive, how we can heat our homes. They want 100% control of your life. They don't want you eating beef because that causes environmental problems. They don't want you to be able to have gasoline cars. They don't want you to have anything that you want. That sounds like control to me. But thank God, God put a man in that's standing up against them. One guy that really exposed them is Charlie Kirk. He wrote this article on the WEF. And they are the elites of the world. They go to Davos, Switzerland, and get together and fly their big jets in and carouse around with each other for a week. And they fly their jets in and make an incredible amount of carbon footprint. But they don't want you to have anything like that. They want you to ride a bicycle. They want you to, if you do have a car, they want you to have the Obama car, which is a little old bitty junky thing that 4 people can't even get into. Does anybody remember the General Motors Volt car that they made? Volt. It was the first electric car. A little old bitty thing, and they manufactured a bunch of these, and nobody would even buy them, because they were electric. They weren't very good. You couldn't even find a charging station for them. But they put that on people, And that's the way we see these rulers today that want to rule people's lives. And that's exactly the way it'll be during tribulation. They'll have one ruler, the Antichrist, and he'll rule it with the false prophet and Satan empowering him and deceiving people. And for that 7-year period, people will be totally dominated. And in 2 Thessalonians 2, it says, and they'll believe the lie and not the truth. People think, well, if I miss the rapture, I'll get saved during tribulation. Well, God's going to make a way for you to do that. But he also says it won't be easy. Because the easiest time you can get saved is right now. Under the grace of God. So if people are refusing the grace of God today, what makes them think they're going to accept not the grace, but the judgment of God in the future? But we know there will be a lot that will accept Christ during the tribulation. But then they will be beheaded for the word of their testimony. They will lose their heads for it. Okay, let's get back to the 70 weeks. So what I wanted to show you here with this chart, keep your chart and bring it next week, because God deals with these 490-year cycles, and you can go back and see the way God dealt with the different times of periods of 490-year cycles. Now, in the 70 weeks of Daniel's cycle, when Jesus rode into the city to be the king of the Jews, he finished the 69th week. What the prophet Daniel and the prophets did not see, but was hidden as a mystery, was the church age. A parenthetical period of time of now about right at 2,000 years inserted in between the time he came into the city and till the time of the rapture of the church and the tribulation beginning. And let me tell you, we're only 5 years away from the 2 days. 2030. Jesus was crucified in 30 AD, April the 6th. I'll be talking this morning about Mary of Bethany. And she anointed him 2 days before his crucifixion. But he had rode in to show the Jews he was a king of the Jews. Naturally, as a nation, the national leaders all rejected him. But he did have a lot of followers that next week will be Palm Sunday. We'll be talking about the triumphant entry and all those that followed him in the entry when he came off the Mount of Olives. Actually, he was coming from Lazarus' house at Bethany. It was actually Simon the leper's house. So we'll be talking about it. I've been over to Bethany twice. It's about a 2 mile over the Mount of Olives from where the Temple Mount was of Jerusalem. So it's about a 2 mile walk to go from Bethany over to Jerusalem. And he rode the donkey down, and when you go on tour, they will walk you down just the path where he took all the way down up. Now you can't cross. First time I was there, you could cross the Kidron Valley, little Kidron, and go up to the eastern gate. Now they got a highway that runs through there. So I don't think they take them across the highway and up to there. It's too dangerous. So I just couldn't believe they built a highway around there. I'll tell you something that's interesting. I was in '83. I'm a runner. I'm a marathon runner. So there was a guy on our tour that was from Las Cruces, New Mexico, that was also a marathon runner. And here we'd been on tour now for about 2 weeks. We hadn't really had a chance to run in over 2 weeks. So he found out I was a runner, and he came over to me at breakfast one morning. He says, we get 1 free day on this tour. And he says, would you like to go for a run? And I says, yeah, I'd like to go for a run. He said, well, okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's leave. We were staying at the King David, or one of those hotels right down by there. And we went up there and met in front of the eastern gate. And we took off and we ran. All we had on us was our passport and a bottle of water, I believe. We took a bottle of water. And we ran all the way to Bethlehem, which was 7.5 miles over. And we went to the gate, or where you enter, and there's a big statue there that was built for I believe Rachel, who was the mother of Benjamin and Joseph. And then we turned around and ran 7.5 miles back. We got 15 miles in. Because he always said, he says, I just wanted to see how far it was to when Jesus walked from Bethlehem back over to Jerusalem, how far it was. So we got a 15-mile run in. And So that was a kind of a highlight of our trip, getting to go for a run. And anyway, and then when I went again, we were on a cruise ship for 7 days. I thought we were so trapped, except each day we got to go out, but you couldn't go for a run. So I was up there running on top of the deck, and those guys were complaining because they were trying to sleep, and my feet were pounding on the top of the deck. And they came and told me, so you can't be up there running in the day, because those guys, they work all night and they're trying to sleep. And I said, okay. So then I get to Mykonos, and I'm wanting to go for a run on the beach. So I'm running along there, and I look over, and it's a nude beach. So interesting. These Europeans are different, man, I'll tell you. So I just turned around and ran back. But what is fun is to rent the little motorcycles or the bicycles and go for a ride along there. That's kind of fun.